Okay, so what do book influencers do? So book bloggers, they spend countless time reading. So I think not to, shade other influencers like fashion influencers or beauty influencers, but I guess their influencing is less time consuming because you don't have to, read something. For a book blogger, for a true book blogger, if they are actually reading their book, it takes hours, and that is a lot of brain work. And if you think about it, guys, paper can actually cut you. It's quite dangerous. So number one, book influencers, they read a lot. Okay, so that's number one. That's what they do. So it's a time consuming role. So, what kind of content do book influencers create? So they write reviews, so long captions, perhaps on Instagram, videos, so they can talk, they can describe their book, say how they felt about their book, strongly recommend the book, maybe just maybe not recommend the book. Reels, I know reels, it's quite a big thing now with TikTok and with Instagram doing reels as well. So reels, pictures, I love a picture. I'm quite simple in the fact that I think pictures for me, they do the job. But also questions of the day. So to get people talking and then also to weigh in on topical issues. So recently there was an author that was on Instagram and she was commenting on negative reviews of her book. And that was making the rounds on Instagram. So it's one way to get your book out there, but we also do talk a lot about things that are going on Instagram or on TikTok or on YouTube, but we also talk a lot about what's going on maybe in the world as well. So what exactly does a book influencer do and on what platform? So you have Instagram, so you have bookstagrammers, so that's what I consider myself to be. You have TikTok, so BookTok. You have YouTube, so BookTube, and then you have websites, magazines, and so on and so forth. So again, if you are someone who wants to get yourself out there as an author, I would recommend trying to create an account on these platforms, so especially TikTok now. I mean, I was in Waterstones. So for those who are not in the UK, Waterstones is like the equivalent of Barnes and Noble in the US. So it's the biggest bookshop in the UK. And the table that's right at the front of the bookshop, it said influenced by BookTok, so influenced by TikTok. So I think for authors, it's really important that you guys as well have a social media presence, not just the book influencers, but I do think you yourselves need a social media presence. And it doesn't mean that you have to create, really complex videos, complex reels, but just get yourself out there, make a name for yourself, interact with book influencers, interact on BookTok. Yeah, get yourself out there. I'm going to stop to see if there are any questions. Okay, so notice that only certain books can blow up on TikTok. And it's actually quite interesting because this was making the rounds on Instagram. Because we also noticed as well on Instagram that the books that are popular on TikTok are very different to the books that are popular on Instagram or on YouTube or on book Twitter. So I think again it goes down to who exactly is your audience, who is using TikTok. I'm not really on TikTok. I think, I don't know, I think maybe I'm a bit too old for TikTok, but it's definitely a different demographic to maybe who's on Instagram. But yeah, I also have noticed as well that certain books blow up on TikTok, and we can talk about that more in a second as well. Uh, okay, so moving on to the next page. So again, what do book bloggers do? So aside from creating content in terms of videos, pictures, writing reviews, we do interact a lot with authors. Speaking for myself, I tend to interview an author once every 2 months because I think there's something quite special in speaking to the person behind a story, finding out their crafts, finding out why they wrote the story. And it's definitely something that people online want to see. So via Instagram Live, via Zoom calls like this, via Twitter Spaces. So that's what a lot of book bloggers do now as well. They like to speak to authors, which again echoes my point as to why I think it's important that authors have a presence online so you can get yourselves out there. Book influencers, they also create campaigns, so publication day campaigns. So that means when it's released on the day, you might see it all over people's stories. You also will see blog tours. So maybe you have a 1 week blog tour and you'll have a different influencer on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday, on Friday. So maybe the one on Monday, they're focusing on the first half of the book. The one on Tuesday, they're focusing on a certain character. So again, it does take a lot of time, but campaigns, that's what a lot of book bloggers do as well. And then book club, but we'll come to that in a second. Um, are there any questions before I proceed? Because I feel like I'm talking a lot. Are there any questions? Um, Okay, we have a question from someone who is anonymous. I feel like my marketing isn't getting anywhere. Any ideas on how I can get book influencers on my side and get them to help? Okay, so we're going to discuss that in a second. So I'm not going to answer your question in a second because I'm hoping within the next couple of slides I would have answered that question. So we'll come back to that in a second. And if I haven't answered that, please let me know. But I'm sure that I would have covered that. Any other questions? What about people that do audio only? So people who only listen to audiobooks, I'm assuming. So audiobooks, I do listen to audiobooks, but one thing that I do find that is audiobooks don't have a big presence on social media. I mean, this might sound shallow, but social media is about, oh no, I meant people who don't do face-to-face interviews online. Oh, people who only do face-to-face interviews. No, I meant people who don't do face-to-face interviews online. So I'm not too sure what this question means, Janine. Do you mean that people who don't do like face-to-face like this, they don't have their camera on, they only like to kind of speak on audio? Okay, don't show their face online. Okay, well, I still think you can get yourself out there. It will be difficult. Let's be real, it will be difficult. And let me tell you why. So when I first started my page a couple of years ago, I did not show my face. I did not speak. I only showed pictures of books. I realized that as I was speaking more, as I was showing my face more, as people were seeing my personality more, my engagement increased. People were more interested in the things that I was saying. Um, so I think it may be a disadvantage if you are someone who doesn't want to show your face, because I think when you show your face, you're showing a little bit more of your personality. So I think honestly, it's something you have to be comfortable with. If you're not comfortable showing your face, that is fine. But I do think there may be a bit of a disadvantage to you. And that's just from my own personal experience. I've noticed that when I show my face, when I speak a little bit more, there's more engagement. I'm not sure if that answers the question. But yeah, we'll come to that in a second. I don't know if anyone else has anything to say about that, if anyone understands what I'm saying, because I think, yes, it does. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, we will move on. Okay, so just to summarize about book influencers. So we are not editors, we are not professionals. This is a hobby, okay? This is a hobby. We do not get paid to do this, okay? I think even people who have really large platforms, I think maybe they get paid for certain campaigns, but I think compared to other influencers, so the fashion influencers, the beauty influencers, the hair influencers, they get paid. I think book bloggers as a whole, we do not get paid. So I just want you guys to bear that in mind, that when you are interacting with book influencers, book bloggers, this is something that's coming out of their own time, and they're doing it because it's their passion. I absolutely love reading. I love showing my passion for reading. I love speaking to authors, but sometimes it is time consuming, and I also have a full-time job. So there's has to be some sort of balance, and there has to be understanding from the author. And I'll come to that in a second as to why I say that. Okay, so how can writers work with book influencers? And hopefully this will answer the question that came in the chat from someone who was anonymous, okay? Okay, so why do you need a book blogger? So should you consider working with a book blogger? Absolutely. So I'm not just saying that because I consider myself to be one, I'm saying that because it will be to your benefit. As I've just mentioned, book bloggers are everywhere on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube, on TikTok. They drive a lot of sales, they do a lot of marketing. So you absolutely should consider working with a book blogger. Just publishing a book is not enough these days, especially if you are self-publishing or if you are with a very small publishing house. Just publishing a book will not be sufficient. You need to have some sort of partnership with book bloggers. And it doesn't matter the number. I'm sure you're probably thinking this person needs to have 10,000 followers or 5,000 followers. If someone has 100 followers and they are 100 dedicated and loyal followers, and this person says, "Oh, this book was absolutely fantastic," people will go out and buy that book. That's 100 new readers that you have. So don't discredit someone because they have a small following. So why do you need book bloggers? So as I just mentioned, for exposure. So these social media platforms, they reach an audience that may not enter a physical bookshop. So I'm not trying to put down TikTok, but I do wonder how many of them do actually go into a bookshop or go into a library. They are influencing and they are reaching an audience, but that goes to show that you do need to be on there because you're going to be reaching a different type of audience. When a book blogger shares a review, more people will learn about you and your book, and they will be influenced. It sounds quite simple because it really is. If someone says that they like a book, they really like a book and you should go out and go out and buy it, go out and read it, people will do so. And as I mentioned before, even if that book blogger has a small following, exposure means greater opportunities to sell your book. So as I mentioned again, so most book influencers have avid bookworms following them. So if a book blogger says a book is good, that means sales. So for me as well, I would say I'm quite specific in who I take recommendations from. But if someone in my trusted circle of bookworms says, "Femi, this book is absolutely amazing," I don't even need to read the blurb. I will go out and buy it. So that's why it's important for you guys to work with and partner with book bloggers, book influencers. Okay, so how to work with a book blogger. So there are a lot of book influencers out there. So just a little story. So I started the Book Alert, my platform, just at the beginning of 2020, so just before the pandemic. Obviously, no one knew what was about to happen, but that timing kind of worked in my favor because a lot more people were reading, a lot more people were at home. And when I started the page, I even called it the Book Alert because I thought it was something so unique. I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be alerting people to books. I went on Instagram, I went on YouTube, I went on Twitter. There's a large community out there. So there are a lot of book bloggers out there, which is great. But bad news is that there are a lot of book bloggers out there. So you need to try and figure out which book blogger works for me. What do I expect? What do I want from a book blogger? There's a lot to sift out. I mean, there is a book blogger out there for you, but you do need to kind of put in some research and work before you approach them. More to that in a second. So you have to find the right book blogger. And then before approaching a book blogger, ask yourself these questions. Have I researched their page? So this question, it sounds so simple, but you will be surprised by how many authors reach out to me and they say, "Oh, I want you to read this poetry book that I have." I don't read poetry. I'm someone who I'm not going to just put anything on my page because I believe that some people actually go out and buy a book if I say, "Oh, okay, it's good, you need to go and read it." So I'm very, very specific with what I put on my page. So if someone approaches me and said, "Oh, can you read poetry?" That to me shows that they haven't done their homework because poetry has not been featured on my page. So have you researched their page before you reach out to them? What do you want from this book blogger as well? Do you want a review, a full-on review? Do you want a review in terms of a caption, or do you want a video review? Because also you have to think about the time frames as well. Do you just want to share in the stories? Do you want a reel? I think it's important to let that person know early on so expectations are met, and then also they can decide as well whether or not they can fulfill your desires. What are your expectations regarding timeframes? So do you want this book blogger to have read your book by its publication day, or you're quite flexible? These are the things you kind of need to think about. And then ultimately, is this book blogger the right fit for me? Do you think that they will like my book? Because there's no point in giving your science fiction book to a book blogger that only reads contemporary African fiction. It's just not a right fit. So you have to ultimately think about, is this book blogger the right fit for you? I'm going to pause there because hopefully that does answer one of the questions that was asked earlier on. I'm going to go back to the Q&A because I can see some questions coming in. Is there more engagement when the author shows themselves? Absolutely, absolutely. So I would say that the authors that I've had join my book club, I've had way more attendees when I have authors join my book club. Again, we're going to come to that in a second. I think the authors that I follow on Instagram and follow on Twitter are authors that tweet a lot, that show pictures of themselves a lot, not even just of their books, but also of their life, of their families. So you just get to know them on a deeper level. So absolutely, there's more engagement when the author shows themselves. Are bookstagrammers ARC readers? So ARC means advanced reader copy. So most bookstagrammers, they will say whether or not they accept advanced readers. Most of them do because it's quite nice to have a book before it's released. And as I mentioned before, most bookstagrammers are not paid. Our form of payment, or most book influencers, I should say, are not paid. Our form of payment is in gifted copies of books. So influencers definitely, majority of them do read books ahead of its release date. Absolutely. Do they participate in giveaways? Absolutely. I've done giveaways where I paid for it myself, so I've sent out books to people in different countries, not just in my country, but also as well, sometimes the publisher as well will say, oh, okay, we're going to send you 2 books, Femi, please do a giveaway. Sometimes the author as well, they can sponsor a giveaway and put it on that influencer's page. I have noticed a lot of bookstagrammers post photos of bookshelves or stacks, but not as reviews. This is an interesting one because I think with the rise of TikTok, I don't know how many people do have a TikTok account, but TikTok is not something where you would write a long caption. And because TikTok now is so popular, a lot of people on Instagram feel like they have to compete with that. They feel as if people are not reading their reviews anymore, which is why more people are trying to do video content. I still know a lot of people that do reviews, full detailed reviews, but then again, I think it comes back to what I said before. Is this book blogger the right fit for me? There are so many book bloggers out there. So if you are looking for a book blogger that does write a review, they will 100% will be out there, but it just requires you to do research because a lot of people still do it. Like myself, I still write reviews. I'll take another question as well. As a book blogger and reader, what do you think is most important? Back matter. I'm not too sure what back matter means, so please explain that to me. I'm so sorry, I don't know what that means. Cover art or marketability. Well, they say never judge a book by its cover, but I don't think that applies to book influencers. I picked up books where I don't know a single thing about it, but because it has a pretty cover, I will pick it up. But I think for me and for other book influencers that I know, I think the most important thing for us is representation. I think that's number one. I'm more likely to pick up a book if I feel as if, oh, okay, I can relate to that person in terms of their race, their ethnicity, their gender, their culture, genre. I think that's another one. So if I know it's a contemporary women's fiction book, I don't have to read the blurb. I will just pick it up. So I don't just think it's about looks. I think it's about genre. I think it's about representation. Again, it depends on who you ask and where you go. Places like TikTok, they may say, oh, okay, it is about cover, but then maybe YouTube where they're talking about the book in depth. It's more, it's deeper than that. I'm going to take one more question and then we'll carry on. And I promise we'll go through the questions at the end. I'm just conscious of the time. So last question for now. So you mentioned that book bloggers are mostly people who do that as a hobby. So do you think the approach to work with them is different than a traditional digital marketing approach? So because I've never worked in traditional marketing, I can't tell you what the traditional marketing approach would be, because I've never experienced that. But my understanding is that the traditional marketing approach, there would be payment, there would be some sort of contractual agreement put in place beforehand. Whereas with book bloggers and also as well with the traditional marketing approach, I think the timelines are a bit more strict because it is a paid job. Whereas when you are working with book bloggers where they are doing it as a hobby, I think more grace is needed because they are doing it as a hobby. They're doing it because they love it. There's no financial gain from them. So I think the main differences between, book bloggers and traditional marketing is that maybe time frames are a bit more relaxed. You have to probably tell a book blogger 2 months or 3 months in advance, whereas you can tell traditional marketing 6 weeks in advance or 4 weeks in advance. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so we will carry on. We'll carry on through the slides, and then hopefully by the end we'll have a chance to go through more questions. Hopefully I'm not talking too fast. I hope you guys can hear me. I hope you guys are enjoying. And thank you, Gracie, for explaining what back matter is. Oh, like a blurb. Okay. So, okay, FYI, a little bit of a fun fact about me. I don't read blurbs, okay? I don't read blurbs. I only read blurbs when I'm picking a book for book club, because I have a good understanding of my book club members. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to read the blurb. If I'm picking a book for myself and then later on I'm going to share it on my platform, I don't read the blurb. I tend to pick it again based on the things that I just said before. So the genre, the representation of what the book is, the representation. So maybe the author, if I know the author's race, or if it's a woman, I'm more likely to read a book by a woman. Those are the kind of things that I would pick a book. So I don't tend to read the blurb. I don't know. Is that like a bookish sin to not read the blurb? I know a lot of people do read blurbs, but I honestly don't think it's as important anymore. I think people becoming a bit more, I don't want to say shallow, but I think a pretty cover is probably more sellable than a blurb these days. Okay, we'll carry on. Okay, so how to work with a book blogger. So approach. So I'm just going to give you like a little, hopefully it's not coming across as patronizing, but the reason why I'm giving you this kind of little paragraph to kind of go by is because you will be surprised by how many authors have approached me, and number one, they've got my name wrong. They're calling me something else when in fact on my page it says my name. So that says to me that you've just seen, oh, okay, it says book blogger, and you've just decided to message me, but you can't get my name right. So definitely start with hello, how are you? Nice to message you, Femi. Nice to message you, XYZ. So honestly, a little bit of manners, it goes a long way. Honestly, a hello can make such a difference. So start with hello, how are you? Put their name in, that personal touch, that makes such a difference. And then you go on to state what you want and why you think this person will be able to deliver this for you. Also, as well, as I mentioned before, which is probably the main difference again between traditional marketing and book influencing, book blogging, time. Please do not tell a book influencer that you want them to read the book and write a full-on review by next week. It's just not going to happen. In fact, many people won't even respond. I know some book influencers who have bigger platforms than myself. She said that, she skims the message, and if number one, if they've got their name wrong, she deletes it. Number two, if it's a short time frame, she deletes it. So think about what it is you want and try and plan in advance. That it's just so key. I know it's quite simple, but it honestly will make a world difference. It will make a world of difference. And also as well, just this last point here, if you can establish a rapport with the influencer prior to reaching out to them, even better. And when I say that, I mean, interacting with their posts, reading some of their reviews, just kind of getting a feel of who they are, commenting on some of their posts as well beforehand. Because you don't want it to feel as if, oh, okay, I just want this from you. Because again, as I said to you again, it's a hobby for them. So you want the influencer to feel as if, oh, okay, I'm actually starting to build this rapport with this person. I want to read this book for them. I want to share a review for them. But just to add as well, something just occurred to me as well. You can approach an influencer to kind of just take a picture of a book and share it in their stories. That doesn't take that much time. So if it's something like that, you can ask, within short notice. But if you want a video, if you want a full-on review, I would recommend doing that far in advance. Okay, so just some handy tips as well. So, as I mentioned before, there are a lot of book influencers on different platforms. So, how exactly do you find these book influencers? How do you find the right book influencer for you? First and foremost, search hashtags. There's literally a hashtag for everything, and with each hashtag, you have people following these hashtags. I'm going to show you some of the popular hashtags that I follow that I engage with. But yeah, you can get a hashtag for absolutely everything for a particular genre, for if you like women's literature, if you want to read books from a certain country, from a certain culture, there's a hashtag for everything. And influencers, they do tend to hashtag their work. So you can definitely search hashtags. Um, Speak to fellow authors, speak to your publisher if you do have a publisher. Do they have an influencer program? Do they have a set of go-to influencers that you can interact with and liaise with? That's also a point of call. Keep a spreadsheet of book influencers and their various social media platforms. So if you know that, okay, I've got a thriller coming out and I noticed this thriller book influencer, just note it down. You just never ever know when it's going to come in handy. Or if you come across a page and they're really, really good at videos, note it down. Keep a spreadsheet of these things. It will come in handy. And being pushy is a no-no. Uh, so as I mentioned before, I do work full time, and being a pharmacist is not it's not the easiest of jobs sometimes. So reading and then sharing content, sometimes it's not my priority. So sometimes when I have not responded within a couple of days to an author, they may comment on one of my posts and say, "Oh, can you please respond to my DM?" Please refrain from doing that. The person will get back to you in their own time, which is why it's key to plan in advance. Okay, so these are some hashtags that I think everyone should kind of take note of. So when you are looking for an influencer to interact with, to work with, you can just search these hashtags and people who have tagged these hashtags in their posts, it will come up. So you can try and find influencers that way. So you have Bookstagram, Bookstagrammer, Book Twitter, BookTok, Bookworm, etc., etc. So I believe these slides will get sent out later on. But yeah, these are the kind of hashtags that I think are a good starting point. This is like your bread and butter hashtags. Okay, so I've got a little quiz. Um, so when I made my platform, there's a lot of book talk that I was not aware of. There's a lot of jargons, there's a lot of abbreviations that I was not aware of. And I just thought it would be quite fun to know if you guys know these abbreviations. So first and foremost, who knows what TBR stands for? I think we're just gonna type it. Okay, TBR. Okay, everyone knows it. Okay, wow. Okay, I thought that would be harder because before I joined Instagram and Twitter, I had no idea what that meant. But yes, to be read, that's what that means. Um, who knows what DNF stands for? Okay, you guys are good. Did not finish. Okay, wow. Okay, and you know what? There's also a big debate going on right now on Bookstagram as to whether or not one should finish a book. So if you're not enjoying a book, do you put it down or do you power through? Some people think, well, if you spent money on it, you do want to just soldier through, but ultimately, reading is not a chore, it's a hobby. So there's this massive, massive debate. Do you finish a book or do you not finish a book? But yes, did not finish, that's what it stands for. Um, Shelfie. Can someone tell me what Shelfie is? I can see we have Team DNF. I'm Team DNF as well. You don't want to know the amount of books I've DNF this year. My attention span is just, yeah, it's not the same anymore. Yes, when you take a picture of yourself with your bookshelf. So it's a shelfie, absolutely. My bookshelf is an absolute mess right now, but there are some gorgeous bookshelves out there, and it's some good bookshelf inspiration. But yes, when you take a picture of yourself with your bookshelf behind you, that is what a shelfie is. And book smut. My mum is here, so we have to keep this one PG. But yeah, can someone tell me what book smut is? When a book is spicy, absolutely. So steamy content, book spice, and you'll be surprised. Like Book Smut is like a big seller. A lot of popular books that I've come across, and I think someone alluded to this earlier on. It's got a lot of smut in there. But yeah, spicy books. That's what it means. Okay, let's see what we have now. Okay, we have more. Okay, just a few more. So, can someone tell me what TW means? Trigger warning. Trigger warning, absolutely. The first person got that was Annalel, which is a really nice name. So trigger warning. Again, I actually asked a lot of my followers this. I put a poll in my stories. Do you think authors should have trigger warnings in their like before the start of their book? And it was actually really split. My personal opinion is that I don't need a trigger warning. I feel as if I'm reading a book and I'm starting to feel uncomfortable, I will put it down. But I think for a lot of people, just for them, so that they can mentally prepare themselves, trigger warnings are essential to a lot of people. But people do consider them to be spoilers. There's a one book where the trigger warning was the plot twist. So when I saw the trigger warning, and then as the book was starting to unfold, I was like, oh, okay, I know what's going to happen. So it can be a bit of a spoiler, but ultimately it does prepare the reader for some heavy content, let's say. Someone says, would that not be part of the blurb? I know a lot of books don't have trigger warnings on the back. I think some do, some don't. I don't think it's a must-have. I think it's down to personal preference. But it does seem as if a lot of readers do want trigger warnings. They do want to be prepared mentally for what they're about to see. Okay, reading nook. Can someone tell me what a reading nook is? This one I don't know. Space to read. Yes, a comfy space to read. So I've actually just moved house and I've been trying to figure out what my reading nook will look like. But yeah, it's just a comfy space to read. A lot of people want it to be aesthetically pleasing as well. So they may have some plants, they may have the bookshelves color coordinated. But yes, ultimately it is a cozy reading space. Okay, just a couple more. QOTD. Can someone tell me what that is? So this one was a tricky one because it can be two. So it's quote of the day or question of the day. But when it relates to book influencers, I was thinking more question of the day. So I like to use questions of the day either in my stories or on my posts to kind of engage my followers, to get them thinking, to get them talking. So that's another one that authors can do as well. So maybe if you know certain people have picked up your book, you can say question of the day. Who was your favorite character in this book? So yeah, question of the day. That's what I meant there. And the last one, buddy read. Can someone tell me what a buddy read is? Yes. Annalelle, again, you're like fast fingers. But yes, when you read a book with a friend. So I try to do buddy reads, but I either get carried away and I end up finishing the book before my friend, or I'm super slow and then I'm slowing everyone else down. But yeah, buddy reads are a great way to kind of get people talking, get the conversation going. So yeah, hopefully you guys are picking up some book influencer jargon. But I think that was it. So we just have one more segment, and I'm going to quickly fly through this because time is going. So as I mentioned before, I am a book club host. So I started my book club back in 2020, and it was essentially just an online book club. So I started it just before the pandemic. I took a little bit of a break, and I picked it up again towards the end of 2020. And I realized that a lot of people, because they are spending a lot of time by themselves at home, more people are reading, people want to talk about their books. So I think book clubs are a great way for authors to get themselves out there. So as I just mentioned, since the start of 2020, 1 in 3 adults are now reading more, and that's almost 1 in 2 in 18 to 24-year-olds. So everyone is reading more essentially. So isolation, not being able to see family and friends. There was a drive for people to join book clubs as a way to interact with like-minded people and ultimately to form friendships. So how to get your book into a book club. So if you have a website for your book or like an author profile, you could and you should create a section on your website specifically for book clubs. Also, if you are someone who is comfortable joining book clubs, you could potentially have like a scheduling or a book me section of the website where it says, I'm free to join an online book club or I'm free to join an in-person book club in the city around this time. So I think that would be quite beneficial. Also, as well, I think when you compare a book with a movie or a book with food, it's great for a book club. So for example, as I mentioned, we do meet up for those who are based in London because my online book club, I have people from Jamaica join, I have someone from France join, I have a lot of people from the US join. I'm due to come to the US actually to meet some of them. So when we meet in person for those who are in London, we meet over food. So, for example, if your book is set in a certain country, on your website or on your page, say this book goes well with this certain cuisine. Or if you know that this book has similar themes to a certain film, you can say, oh, I suggest to your book club to watch this film together. So if you have book pairings, that will be absolutely great. So top tips for book clubs and reaching out to book clubs and being part of book clubs. So reach out to book club organizers. You can use the book club hashtag on TikTok, on Instagram, etc., etc. You can contact local libraries for reading groups. If possible, at the end of your book, have a physical list of questions, so discussion questions. When I read a book and I get to the end and I see that the author has taken time out to put some questions there, I'm like, thank God, I'm more likely to pick the book for book club, honestly, because one, it saves time for the book club organizer to think of questions, but also it says to me that the author wants this book to be spoken about. So if you can have some questions, have a discussion guide. Be open to joining online or in person. Again, this is a personal preference because some people are introverted, some people don't want to join, but it is a good way to get yourselves out there. And if you can, offer incentives. So if it's a small book club of less than 10 people and you're able to do so, why not send everyone a copy? Why not send someone a bookmark? Okay, so as I just mentioned before, it's great if you can have discussion questions. So if you can ask questions about the character, ask questions about perhaps social issues. I know they say sometimes talking about social issues can be a bit awkward, but in my book club, we talk about anything and everything. Talk about a quote from the book, talk about the ending, talk about the start of the book. So if you can have some like a discussion guide at the end of the book, it will be absolutely great. So just to touch a little bit on book club appearances as an author. So again, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I do strongly recommend it. As I mentioned before, when I know an author is joining my book club, I talk about it online and my attendance, it goes up. I have way more attendees. People like to hear authors talk about their work. So, but you do have to prepare yourself because if you have a book club of 15 people, not everyone may love your book. Now, I'm sure everyone will be respectful and they will not say, oh my gosh, I did not like this book. But they may say, oh, why did you decide to write XYZ like this and not like that? So you have to be prepared to receive some criticism. Uh, I I had an author, she she was not too happy with some of my members' comments, and I don't think my members were not rude at all. But they said, oh, they didn't understand why this was done, and I thought it was absolutely fair. But that author definitely took that to heart. So I think you have to understand that when you put a body of work out there, not everyone is going to love it. So you do have to bear that in mind that when you are joining a book club discussions will be had. So be prepared, keep your talks short and sweet, get involved with the questions. Also plug yourself at the end. If you can give the group like an insider's gossip, so maybe you can tell them, oh, I'm releasing my next book on this day, etc., etc. But ultimately, you plug yourself and send a thank you note. That does go a long way as well. Wow. Okay, I have reached the end, and I think that was just on time. I've reached the end. I'm not sure how much time we have left. Maybe we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm not sure if we have questions. Um, let's just see. Let's just see if we have some questions. Okay. Can you reach out to a number of book bloggers simultaneously? You absolutely can, but then the message will be generic. So I think it's quite easy to pick up on a generic message, unless for every message you're going to change the person's name, then absolutely. Because I understand that reaching out to a number of book bloggers at the same time, it's time consuming. But as I mentioned before, I think working with influencers, it shouldn't just be one. I think you should have, you know, a good number of influencers that you work with, that you interact with. So I 100% do recommend reaching out to multiple bloggers at the same time. You can't just rely on one, you need quite a few. Is there a book blogger database? As an author and blogger, I find it difficult to find bloggers in my genre. I don't think there's like a general database, because there are a lot of book bloggers. As I mentioned before, when I made my page, I really thought I was doing something unique. It's definitely not. There are book bloggers in every single country, in for every single genre. So there isn't one general database. I do know that a lot of the big publishing houses, they have their own book influencers list. So if you are with one of those kind of publishing houses, you can kind of use their database. But ultimately, this is why I said that you should have a spreadsheet. So when you do come across certain book influencers, note them down and you can build your own database, because unfortunately there isn't one wide one for everyone. Okay, we have a question. Femi, in your opinion, what do you think is the best channel to reach out to book bloggers? DM, emails, something else entirely? Is there particular etiquette? Um, I think DM first and foremost. I think that that's a great way to start off with. If someone does not like a DM, more times than not, they will put in their bio, please reach out to me via email only. If you do not see that, I would say reach out via DM, and then maybe someone will say, oh, okay, let's discuss this more on XYZ. But I would say DM, and you don't even have to start the message with, oh, okay, hi, I need XYZ from you. You can just be, hi, my name is, how are you? Start to have a conversation from that. And then maybe after a couple of back and forth via DM, you see how the conversation goes. But I would say always start with DM. I don't think there's a particular etiquette, but for me, I do like a DM. But that's, you can hop into my DMs. That's what I say. Um, okay, and I think this is the last question. Is there an average time frame for a book blogger to read and review a book? How long is a piece of string? That's a good question. I don't think there is an average time frame. Again, I think it's very book blogger specific. Some book bloggers, they do this full time. They may not be getting paid for it, but they do this full time, so they probably have more time in their hands, as opposed to someone like me who doesn't do this full time. So I can't at the moment. I don't have the capacity to read all day. I would say it also depends on how thick your book is and the writing style. Is your writing style a bit harder to digest? That means you will need more time. Is a thick book, again, you would need more time. I would say always, if you want them to read and write a full review, I would always give at least 2 months. That's the minimum. That's what I would say for a full review. Give at least 2 months. And you can also mention that, oh, okay, publication date is this, so I would prefer if you could read it by this, but give at least 2 months. I would say that's a good enough time. Because also as well, you may be one of several authors that would have reached out to this influencer, which is why sometimes it's good to start with the smaller influencers who may not have a bigger platform and kind of grow from there. But yeah, I would say 2 months is a good enough time to read and review. Is there value in doing a book blog tour months or years after release? Say you're releasing the end of your series and you want book one to be featured. Absolutely. I get sent special editions of books that were released, years beforehand. I get sent paperback copies of books that I already have the hardback copies. So I think absolutely there is value in doing a book and doing a blog tour. At the end of the day, I know that new releases, they always get like all the attention, but there's nothing wrong in showcasing your backlist. So I do think it's absolutely worth doing a blog tour, especially if it is a book in a series or maybe a character features in another in another book. So 100% I do think there is benefit. Um, I think that may be all we have time for. If anyone has one more question, I can take one more question. If not, I will let you all go and have a great rest of your Sunday. If there are no questions, I will let you all go. Well, thank you so much for joining, and I hope there was some value in this. I hopefully you picked up on some gems. But yeah, please feel free to either email me or send me a message on Instagram if you have any more questions as well. Thank you.